Yeah, historically, every despotic dictator in history is always the first thing they do is take away your freedom of speech. Because if you can't speak out against them and we can't join together and talk about these things, then we're going to be persecuted. So my maiden speech got some people bent out of shape a little bit. So they deliberately took 2 words out of context, and then in the Hall of Tears the next morning, they all had their impassioned speeches and they were crying and hugging men, and one lady cried for about 5 minutes but didn't dampen the tissue that she was using. So she was really upset about that. So and then they thought they were talking to their constituents, but then when the polls came out, one of them with the ABC, they polled 40,000 people, and 75% of them backed what I said. Yeah. So that poll was taken down pretty much instantly. We got copies of it, luckily. But so then they realised they were probably talking to only about 20% of the population, so they all started to backtrack and say, well, it was only 2 words, it was taken out of context. What those 2 words were was about, all I was saying was that, the final solution to the immigration problem is a plebiscite, so the Australian people can have a say on not just how many people come to the country, but who comes to the country, which is by far the more important issue. The numbers are way too high, but it's the people. And obviously, as you know, I'm against any further Muslim immigration. Happy to say it. If thank you. And if that doesn't please everyone, well, I'm not here to please everyone. You can only talk for the community that you think you're speaking for. If it's 5% of the population, so be it. The problem with politicians now is they try and speak for everyone and appease everyone, and by doing that, if you're trying to be all things to all men, you'll be nothing to anyone. And that's what this politics does to it, to these people. It's sort of it's disheartening to be in there to see the hypocrisy, unfortunately, of a lot of the politicians that I'm sitting in that room with. By the way, the people who came out and cried about what I said and made all these impassioned speeches were the same people a month before who voted against my motion to stop funding the Palestinian Authority. And I'm not sure if you know, but the Palestinian Authority, we spend $43.8 million each year, goes to the Palestinian Authority, and they have a pay-for-slay program where if a Palestinian slaughters some innocent Israelis, you'll be looked after while you're in jail. Your family will be looked after, and that's where our money was going. And so all 3 parties, the Labor, Liberal and the Greens, or as I like to call them, the left-wing party, the Socialist Party and the Communist Party, all voted against me. So, and then they came out, the hypocrisy was mind-boggling when they came out and condemned me for those 2 words, as though I'd caused the Holocaust, I guess. Anyway, the freedom of speech, it was an attack on freedom of speech, and then Palaszczuk doubled down on that, as Jules was saying, by firing 4 good people, 4 good Australians who are doing their job because Robbie and his and the state guys wouldn't renounce me for what I'd said in the speech, which was taken out of context, as I said. So freedom of speech is a thing that what Palaszczuk said was we have the right to freedom of speech, but it's not without consequences. That was her words. Now, without consequences, really, if there are consequences, then it's not free speech. In Stalinist Russia, you could say what you like, but then you'd get a bullet in the head anyway. So they were the consequences of saying what you like, as they are in a lot of countries today. So I guess the thing is that the pendulum, I think, really is starting to swing. We've seen what's happened with Brexit, with Trump, and I think here in Australia, the pendulum swung about as far as it can go. Australians are really good at reacting. We're a little bit slow to act, but we're good at reacting. So we're now starting to see a reaction, and it's surprising how many people are coming out of the woodwork, and we have to, as Jewel was saying, we all have to speak about it. We went to the Nigel Farage event the other night, and as I was walking up, a lot of young people came over and sort of surrounded me. I didn't know whether they're going to bash me or... but they end up shaking hands and wanting selfies and all this sort of stuff, and that was the most refreshing thing I think I can imagine, because here's young people who I thought were all going to be so indoctrinated by their school teachers and by their university professors, and here they are, you know, with a brain. They're coming out and saying, you know, we're 100% on your side. And I said, well, you've got to go back to your schools and your work and your universities and speak out, you know, because the radical left will continue to attack us and try and prevent us from saying what we want, and by that taking away our freedom of speech. And we don't all want to go and get into fights with people in the streets. You know, we're just normal people who go along and listen to things like Nigel Farage, and we don't expect to be bashed by Antifa with their signs and their placards and their spitting and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, really good men fought and died for us in trenches, you know, in Flanders Field and the Somme, and they're 18-year-old kids who never wanted to be there in the first place, but they were there for our right to say what we want to say. And if we have to put up with a bit of garbage like the Antifa, the socialists, then that's what we have to do. You know, we really do have to stand up now. Otherwise, if we don't retain our freedom of speech now and fight back, we've lost the cause. And we've turned our back on those people who died in those areas in the jungles in bloody New Guinea and places like that. So I think there is a big groundswell. I think there's a huge movement coming. We're seeing it every day, and it's happening all over the world, but it's really happening here in Australia. And I think it's up to us to keep that movement going. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.